And there's just a bunch of problems in physics which you wish to formulate with Hamiltonians. Okay? And we don't know about a bunch of other characters because their formulations were either too general or they weren't interesting enough. So it's the techniques that you build that really count. And all the general theories and the points of view and the commentaries on them are all fluff, and they don't really count. Okay? And so you got to keep that in mind. For instance, to pick an example, I had a fellow on the SOAR project who went to a meeting recently, and he came back and he said, everyone there is all enthused about connectionism. Okay? And he says, I need to write an article to tell them about these other kinds of architectures so they won't be so enthused about connectionism. And I said, forget it. I said it a little nicer than that. But I said, forget it, because in fact that paper is just talk. That paper is not science, no matter how good it is, and even if you persuade a few people. The real issue is, what techniques will you build that your descendants will have to use to solve their problems? And in fact, if you look over my scientific career, you will see a whole number of places, like the GOMS models, where we, and problem behavior graphs, which I didn't talk about here, where we deliberately attempted to package our scientific results as techniques that could be used by future generations of scientists. Sometimes we were a success, sometimes we weren't. I'm not going to talk about this, but I will sort of say what it's all about. This sort of says that if you have an urge to talk generally, sort of do it at invited talks like this one, or do it on the banquet circuit. Don't kid yourself that these general papers are in fact the stuff out of which your real science is made. So that's sort of it. I could have actually started out this whole talk by giving a maxim from my father. My father was a great maxim maker. And I suppose I should say it the way Lyndon Johnson did, you know, what my daddy told me, okay? And what he used to say is, and he said it incessantly, he always says, keep your eye on the main chance, okay? And if I'd have started out with that maxim, then I probably wouldn't have even had a talk to give, because that's sort of the maxim that covers all of the things that I've said in this talk. Thank you.
We have time for a few questions.
Sure, but don't ask me to talk about anybody else's scientific life. Except Raj's. I talk about Raj's all the time.
Questions? Comments?
So what are your comments on review papers then? They're not philosophizing about it.
Don't do them unless you have something better to do. I mean, look, these are all necessary things to make the scientific enterprise. They are not necessary things to achieve that goal. So observe, what I said was that if this is the scientific style, that you're really fixed on achieving some fundamental, resolving some fundamental scientific question. I mean, for instance, I have never organized scientific meetings. I've almost never been on program committees. Okay, I'm a bad citizen. Okay, I believe those things are important, but man, if there's that goal out there, then you got to be careful, because you will just squander your life. Did that say it too strong? you had a...
Oh, I was just curious, in what capacity were you at Klein Hall for a year, especially...
I was a graduate student in mathematics.
Oh, really?
Yes. Okay. So, I was there, okay? I was at the Citadel, I soaked it up, I left after a year to go out and do game theory at Rand. I knew at that point, deep in my heart of hearts, that I was not a mathematician. But I've got a lot of great stories.
Until you find your quest, what's the right thing to do? And what can you do to increase the chance you're going to come to your quest?
That's hard, because if you observe the nature of my search, it wasn't very directed, right? I don't know. What should I say? Work hard, write review papers, because it makes you knowledgeable. Makes you knowledgeable, all lots of things. But the real answer has got to be try. But be smart enough to get out when it doesn't grab you. Because remember, I didn't say you choose it, I said it chooses you. So you go down and you work on something, and you find out after a couple of years, that this is perfectly good, I got 10 publications out of it, everything's going fine, but this isn't going anywhere if I project it for 30 years. I mean, you just look at this and you sort of say, I know that. Even though when I talk to my friends, I can tell them stories. I mean, we all are good at building up stories about why what we're doing is really a great path and has all of these things. So you got to listen to find out whether you really think that holds. I don't know. Wait for Oliver to talk.
I think in your career you've moved from being a very hands-on, probably coding everything yourself, up to a level where you're working with a very large.
Right. It happened to Chuck Noll too.
Do you have any comments on how to do that successfully?
Well, the most common is don't do it. All my friends on the SOAR project come around and saying, when's the last time you coded a source system? You see, and so there's this little drumbeat that goes on, which says, are you now chief executive officer or you're chairman of the board? Okay, and in fact, I vowed. This is a terrible phrase by you. I vowed in my youth. All right, I vowed in my youth this would never happen. That now I would be coding source systems. I would be down there in the trenches along with everybody else. And it ain't happened, and I feel deeply guilty about this, except that professionally I don't feel guilty about anything. But I really don't like it. So the issue is not to make it successful. I may have done it successfully, I don't know. I shield that from myself. The issue is don't let it happen. But whether you've got an ability that I don't have, I don't know.
Yes, I have two questions. One's a comment, the other one's a question. The comment is that I think you sell short your contribution of institution building, committee work, programmatic stuff, politicking for DARPA. And I just wonder what proportion of your total 90-hour week you think that took.
Huge.
But you didn't mention that at all.
Right. Worthless. I didn't mean to say it. I really didn't mean to say it.
If you didn't do it, this audience wouldn't be here. I mean, this institution probably wouldn't exist the way it does today.
They tell me that's true. All I can say is this was a punk tape talk. So we can only talk about diversions that were punk tape. The diversion in my life, which is simply another diversion to feeling my obligation for the institution, feeling my obligations to ARPA, to sort of continually doing all that activity, is kind of the continuous part of the spectrum. Okay, it goes on forever, it's going on all my life. Takes